welcome back to the Tea and the Butty podcast. I'm Dominic.
And I'm Erica.
And today we're going to be talking about things that British school children aren't taught about British history.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And it's a lot of things, actually. It's quite a large chunk, I mean, considering the true vastness of history, and time and everything,
yeah.
It's like there's a lot to cover, isn't there,
Yeah.
So, you've got to focus on the key events
Mm-hmm.
and, talk about things that, came from that and what changed because of this and what, died because of it, and...
Now, before we get into it, is that the way they teach history in Britain? I mean, I know it's been a while since either of us were in school.
Yeah, it's been a while, but I kind of have vivid memories of being taught a variety of things in primary school.
But like this thing led to this thing and this thing caused this to happen.
Yeah, that kind of thing. I don't remember that. Them saying that.
Yeah, because what happens over here a lot of the time is each event that we learn about in history class sort of stands alone, and you skip a bit of time before you go to the next event. It's
funny because, I put a list of things that were not taught and things that are taught, that I remember,
Mm-hmm.
And the things that are taught are, we start off with I remember bits of the Roman Empire.
Yeah. They go back that far, do they?
Well, it depends. I mean, this is what I personally remember. It's about, roads and plumbing, and it was the Romans that did this, and there was a big empire, and then it fell.
Right.
Julius Caesar, all this. But the main thing I remember when I started secondary school, and the first history class was 1066. The Norman Conquest.
You've mentioned that before.
It was like that. That's it. And if you talk to anyone, it's like, oh, I remember. Yeah, that was what they talked about in history class in school was 1066 and the Norman Conquest. That's when history began. For modern history of Britain began. You know. And then it jumps to a bit about the Peasants' Revolt of 1381. I've talked about the Peasants' Revolt on here before, actually, I think. Mostly about Wat Tyler and his involvement and everything in it. Then we go about 100 years into Henry VIII's rule.
Oh, right.
He's like the first major guy that, it's like, oh,
he's the first major guy in history.
He's making first major king who's making kind of like waves and doing it his way. It's a truncated version featuring his marriages, the beheadings, and a break with Rome and forming the Church of England, that kind of thing. Then it talks about we talked about Bloody Mary, re-establishing Catholicism and burning people.
Yeah.
Mainly Protestants. Then Elizabeth I coming in and reversing that and returning England to the Church of England. Then we skip a big jump to the Industrial Revolution, which in primary school it was kind of all Victorian all the time, I remember. It was like,
Victorian all the time.
The Tudors and the Stuarts. I remember Tudors and the Stuarts, Henry VIII, the kings and queens. And then suddenly Victoria, And I mean, I guess that makes kind of sense. You've just wiped out 200 years there between Elizabeth and Queen Victoria and the revolution, the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
And it's usually a bit about being poor in Victorian times.
But wait, in between there, isn't it the Oliver Cromwell and all of that?
Yes.
So surely you learned about that before. No?
I don't remember. I vaguely, I remember some talk of Oliver Cromwell.
Yeah.
But, usually it was before that. It was
but
Elizabeth I.
You guys do Guy Fawkes Night, and you never learned it in school.
Yeah, it was touched upon, you know, and the Civil War and everything. But mainly it was about Elizabeth I, the Spanish Armada, all that kind of stuff. Francis Drake, and Oliver Cromwell is like, oh, he was this guy, yeah. It's really? Kind of like, it's kind of like, just all put together.
Yeah.
In like touched upon, but really we want to talk about the Spanish Armada and how I think it was Francis Drake who was so cool about, you know, leading them and everything.
Yeah.
I think it was Francis Drake. Now, you know, I'm going to be sacked
yes.
by historians here because now I can't remember who led the England's Armada against them.
Cancelled, that's the word.
Cancelled, that's it.
Historians are going to cancel you.
They're going to cancel me from history. They're
Teen
going to
and
wipe
Butty
me
podcast is cancelled because they've gotten a fact wrong about history.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say Francis Drake was the one, you know, with his, you know, he was having a bowling match and they were like, the Spanish Armada's on its way. And it was just like, oh, well, there's nothing we can do about it right now. But, you know,
yeah,
I remember that being a big thing in history class.
Yeah.
But yeah, most of the time it was in primary school, it was talking about Victorians.
What I think is really cool, and it kind of came up after you were already like not a kid anymore, is Horrible Histories.
Horrible Histories, yeah.
I think that show probably does quite a lot to fill in the gaps. I would think
it does, yeah, and it's
for kids now. Well,
yeah.
Does it still come on?
No, I think it's stopped.
Yeah.
But, you know, it was kind of like one of those things where you got a lot of, like, historical facts, you know, from this comedy show, this sitcom Horrible Histories.
Yeah.
Where they'd, like, perform sketches of, like, historical things that had happened.
And I can't think of anything that we really have or have had over here that does the same thing. Maybe Schoolhouse Rock to a very
Schoolhouse
minor
Rock is
degree.
all about maths.
No, they had history segments.
Oh, do they?
Yeah, all kinds of
stuff. And what is
stuff.
it about?
But it was before.
Well, I mean, we'll talk about that in the next
before,
episode. But yeah.
But it was before I was a kid. It wasn't even on. I think by the time I was a kid, so it's just like, yeah, we didn't. We didn't have anything comparable that I can think of.
After the Victorian attitudes, and, you know, if you're lucky, then the Empire gets a mention. Mm-hmm. You know, this looming British Empire. You never, you know, people would probably think, you know, people in America would think that, schools, they're talking about the British Empire all the time due to people online, you know, they talk to, you know, and it's like, no,
they just
when
teach
I was a kid,
all about all the colonies and all
no, absolutely not. I mean, I'm sure when maybe my father was a kid, or even earlier than that, they were talking about the empire and how great it was and how important it was, and India and South Africa and Rhodesia and Canada and Australia and you know, Egypt and Sudan and all that, you know. And it's just like, well, it's not it's kind of like not looked upon favorably now, you know, because of everything. So that's one of the major things that's not taught is the empire. Yeah. And the atrocities and the antics and the colonization and all that kind of stuff and everything like that goes along with that. Yeah. The East India Company and all that, you know, I just kind of had to figure that out from the internet and, you know.
It's funny because that's a big thing that Britain was very proud of at the time, but
at the time it's now like, oh.
But now it's a little bit like, oh God, you know, we used to go to other people's lands and declare them ours.
Yes, it became a little bit like, I mean, you know, there's no such thing as the empire anymore. It's the Commonwealth now, which you can apply to be a member of the Commonwealth. But it's not like.
Oh, really? Just anybody can?
I think anybody who's not like, you know, part of the UN or something can do it, you know, because there's a lot of countries in Africa.
So America could apply to be part of the Commonwealth.
I don't know. I don't think it could, because I think it's
they've got to be not part.
I have no idea what the stipulation. I have no idea what the stipulations are.
This isn't a podcast about the Commonwealth, for God's sake.
Because the Commonwealth, it's kind of like it's laughed at, you know, because it's kind of just like it's what succeeded the British Empire. All the former colonies. It was like, oh, you can be part of the Commonwealth, and, you know.
That way they're choosing to be part of the empire.
They're choosing to be part of the empire. And we won't have a military presence there because we can't afford it anymore. You know, it's like that kind of thing, you know, like Australia's part of it, Canada, they're the two main things. I think South Africa is too. I think Nigeria is, and I don't think there was any, like, British involvement in Nigeria. Yeah. I'm entirely not sure, so.
That's so interesting, though, that the Commonwealth, because, being an American, we think, I think we would definitely think that you guys learn about, go into America and then
like everybody
America.
talks about how, we'll talk about this in the next episode, but everyone in, that's how it's like taught over the Pledge of Allegiance and the founding of America, and, how noble the struggle was, and proud to be an American.
Well, like in Hamilton, for instance, they make it seem like the king really wanted to hold on to America, and he was getting really annoyed at the things that were happening over here. And
that's another thing. In Britain, we were never taught about the American War of Independence, as it's called, because it was in reality a war. It's part of a larger war with France. Because if people go, why aren't they taught about this? Well, this is a significant event, and it's like, to you, yes.
For us, it was a significant event.
To you, yes, it is, but to Britain, not really in the grand scheme of things, because it's just kind of like, we were fighting a war with France, and it was France that won that. Won that little skirmish there,
The skirmish in America, you mean?
Yeah, because it's like, at the end of we'll probably talk about this in the next episode, which is what you're not taught in the US.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like,
Look for that on Thursday.
It's like very much taught over here. I was like, it was just a group of plucky colonists taking on a huge army and navy.
Yeah.
And winning.
Mm-hmm.
Against all odds. We're the underdog. Yeah.
Right.
It's like, no, it was a lot of help from France there and everything like that. It was just basically a theatre of war in another part of the world,
Yeah. Which Britain was kind of having all the time.
It was having all the time. It was having it in
India.
In India, in South Africa, it was all the time.
Yeah.
It was usually like the British Empire was basically coming onto someone else's land and saying, this is ours now, and the natives saying no.
Yeah, and a fight.
And fights ensued, and then it was like this noble thing of like, we're doing this for England, lads.
Yeah.
For His Majesty, know, and it's like, okay. Then, like what else is taught into World War One? Which is another thing.
World War One is not taught in school?
Oh, no. This is what's taught in school.
Oh.
World War One is trenches, heroes led by donkeys, the Christmas truce of 1914, no man's land, being shot at dawn for desertion. This is what I remember from being taught. World War Two, the Blitz, being evacuated to the countryside if you were a kid, and a brief mention of the Holocaust.
No, yeah.
But... yeah, I mean, large parts of history are, like, left out, like the War of 1812 and the capture of Washington, D.C., and the burning of it.
Again, that was sort of...
That was a minor skirmish again.
Right, yeah.
And I've got the English Civil War, which, in effect, gave us Parliament, and gave, the House of Lords and House of Commons, Oliver Cromwell. I mean, he wasn't that great of a guy anyway, apparently.
He wasn't that great of a guy.
People who go around thinking, like, oh, yeah, you need to be doing this.
Yeah.
And that was it, And, yeah, I mean, that and the transportation of criminals to Australia, which is another empire thing, like...
You are taught that in school or no?
No, we're not taught
really
about any of that in school. It's kind of like, it's supposed to be like, if you brought it up in history or something, it would probably be like, well, everybody knows Australia used to be part of the empire, and it's populated by mainly descendants of British people. But we won't talk about why they were there.
Yeah.
It's because essentially Australia and New Zealand, big penal colonies.
Yeah, because we even know that over here, and I don't really remember, like, being taught it necessarily, but that is, like, a thing that we just know for some reason.
I mean, I guess because Australia is its own country now, and,
You guys should check out this very short-lived, unfortunately, show called Banished.
Banished, yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember where it came on, but just look for it.
It came on the BBC, and it only ran for like one season, I think.
Yeah, it was very good.
It was very good. It had excellent potential.
Mm-hmm.
and they just, for whatever reason, I guess it was too expensive to make.
And that's what it was about.
It was about the first transportation to Australia.
Mm-hmm.
They discovered Australia, they'd made their claims there, and so they went, and so they were like, well, actually, this is on the other side of the world, and our prisons are overcrowded with so many people.
Mm-hmm.
Send them to Australia, and they can just be put in prison there, and we'll just.
And once they got there, the prisoners realized, you know what, we're so far from home.
We're so far from home.
We're probably not going back home. And what are they going to do?
Let's start our own colony.
Yeah, like we're so far over here.
No, because what they were going to do is they were going to.
They were constantly trying to overthrow the
naval officers,
the forces that were holding them there, because it was just like, who are you going to report this to?
Yeah, and even the forces at the time were like, well, we're waiting on another ship to come.
Yeah.
And, so
it's just like,
and it never did.
Right,
because it was a case of like, you're the first ones there. But I guess other ships did arrive.
Yeah.
But they just never, they were just kind of like,
It was quite a good show because they start talking about, okay, let's start building a life here then, because we're here.
We're never going back home. Because what it was is sent to, you were sentenced to 30 years transportation.
Mm.
And it was literally, you're out there for 30 years and you come back.
Yeah.
And it's like, they're not coming back.
After
not at that
30
time.
Years,
there wasn't any planes. There wasn't any internet. It wasn't like, it was like once you were gone from out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's for the prisoner too, who was just like, why would I want to go back to that country?
That's so weird. I wonder if Australians are aware that you British people don't even learn that in school.
Probably, yeah. Because, they may not even learn it in school, you know.
They must. They must learn that's their history.
The history of Australia. No, they probably learn about the Rum Rebellion and stuff like that,
I don't know what that is.
Captain Bligh.
Yeah.
Governor of New South Wales and all that kind of stuff. I don't know.
If you're Australian, let us know.
If you're Australian, let us know what you learn about, because I don't know. I've never been. But yeah. That's kind of like a lot of that kind of stuff pertaining to the Empire is kind of like swept under the carpet.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, we don't want you asking too many of us. Oh, actually, the British Empire, it wasn't as great as as historians try to make out. Oh, the largest empire in world history. Because you might ask, well, why isn't it here today then, and why isn't it still around? And it's
because the people who were actually from those places were finally like, no, get out, get out of here.
Computer says no. It's just very much. It's a lot of these things were like, we'll vote for independence. We'll give you a vote, and it was like, okay, we'll let them have that then.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, we've got to go there and sort it out. The last big thing...
I was just about to say the most recent one, right?
The most recent one was the Suez Crisis.
Oh, no, that's not what I was going to say.
You were going to talk about Hong Kong.
Hong Kong, yeah.
Well, that was just a city. That wasn't like controlling all of China.
That's a pretty big city, though, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and it was given back. Because it was leased to us. It was leased to Britain by the Chinese for like 200 years or something.
What do you mean leased? What does that mean?
China allowed Britain to come in. Because, a lot of like Indonesia and stuff was part of Britain. There was British Indonesia, Malaysia and all that kind of stuff, you know. So Hong Kong was part of that. And it was like a foothold in China and it was like, why would the Chinese let British people do that,
Yeah.
It was all trade. It was all East India Company. It was all...
But then they were just like, nah, not anymore.
Well, not anymore, no.
Prince Charles went over there, didn't he? And like handed them the keys back or something.
Prince Charles was there.
Here's the keys to your house.
Yeah, there's a ceremony on YouTube. I think it's from 1997. That's when it finally...
Oh, I thought it was more recent than that.
It was 1997 because Chris Patton, who was then governor of Hong Kong... it was like the ceremonial handing back to China, but it's like it was too late by that time. China's very communist.
Yeah.
And Hong Kong is very westernized.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah.
Yeah.
There's no, oh, okay, then we'll just get rid of all this Western decadent stuff and just be Chinese now. It's like, no.
Yeah, and it is still separate, I think.
It's quite separate. It's like it's like a colony on its own thing, and it's administered by China now. Hong Kong's their turf, you know.
Yeah.
But yes, all that kind of stuff is not taught in British schools because there's like, ooh, how did we do that? And ooh, it's just about, you know, and it's the same with every country, you know, really. It's just bigging up the achievements, you know. It's just like, look, we invented the internet. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, invented the World Wide Web, but we didn't quite invent the internet.
Yeah. So you're saying that probably those things were taught in schools because, oh, this is something to be proud of until people started to go, actually, it's
you know,
not
like
really.
Younger teachers started coming in and saying, I don't agree with that. I'm not talking about the British Empire unless we talk about the bad aspects of it, you know, and what was being committed and what, you know, what was happening in Ireland and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh no, we can't do that. You know, it's just like, you know, it's like, oh no, X that out.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't want to depress people and think that we're bad and make people want to move away, which they have done anyway.
I mean, I know it was really recent history and even still going on when you were a kid, but was there, mentioning Ireland, was there talk of the IRA?
The Northern Irish troubles, yeah.
Yeah, in school.
Not really, no. I mean, it was on the news.
It was going on,
It was going on. It was current history at that time, you know, current events.
Current events, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, there was a peace process, and I don't remember any fanfare. Well, there was a fanfare about it, obviously, but I don't remember, like, a huge fanfare about it.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe I was just wasn't plugged in at the time, you know.
Were you... This kind of goes along with history, because I remember when I was in school, it did anyway. Were you guys not taught current events in... I can't remember what class it was.
What debates about what's going on that day? No, it was all about King Henry VIII. You know, because when I was a kid, you know, like I was getting into stuff like the 1960s and the Beatles and stuff like that. And I was like, that's history, you know, that's not happening now. It was 30 years ago because I was like the 90s, you know. So let's talk about that. And it's like, nope, today we're going to be talking about King Henry VIII. And,
who determines the British school curriculum?
Oh.
Is it the government?
I think it's down to like governing boards, governing bodies, not the government itself. Maybe even Ofcom. Actually, I think they regulate.
Ofcom determines what kids learn in school.
Ofcom, yeah, you know, it's like
a kid comes home and complains to their parent about something they learned in school today, and they're like, "That's it, I'm calling Ofcom."
Yeah, because I mean, I think they regulate the school governing board. I'm not actually sure.
Yeah.
Actually, so you know, I mean, I'll have to do more research on that
because in this country, education is unfortunately a political area.
Football. Yeah.
So we'll talk a little bit more about that on Thursday. When we talk about American history. But, so I just went... I was just curious if it was the same in Britain or not.
Because the things I remember are, like, just talking about, you know, recent history and stuff like that. The most recent history, though, I mean, like, we would never learn about the abdication or something. I mean, I didn't even know about it until much later, you know.
That is something, though, isn't it? Because we haven't been in school for so long. I mean, really, who knows what they're learning about in school now?
Yeah, they could be learning about all sorts of things. They could have been learning about, something that happened in the 1990s that I can't remember right now. You know,
I don't think we have a lot of really young listeners.
The Falklands War or something like that.
But maybe if any of you guys, maybe if there's any British listeners that have kids, let us know the kinds of things that they're learning about in history, because I am curious about that. How education evolves over time. You know, what they go actually X that out of the curriculum, and we'll talk about this instead. And kids need to know more about this nowadays, and you know, whatever.
But yeah, I remember being taught bits and pieces of things, but no, it was mostly focused on, like, ancient kings and queens.
Yeah. I mean, that's important to learn.
That's important to learn. Ancient kings and queens, but nothing about, like, the empire or its colonies or anything like that, you know? I do remember getting excited, but, I mean, Victoria was 100 years past, you know? The Victorian era. So that was, like, the most recent historical period that we were taught.
Yeah.
And in primary school too, it was like, learning about Victorians and how, and you know, that was fascinating to me because they did, like, it was like this whole thing in, like, year 6, and I was about 9 or 10, and they had this, like, tomorrow we're gonna have a woman come in and she's gonna be like a Victorian teacher and we're gonna be as if living in the Victorian times.
Yeah.
And she came in and she was like a little actress or whatever. She was in costume, and she was like, okay, you know, like the typical Victorian school mom.
Yeah.
And she had the little granny glasses and the bustle and everything, and she looked like, you know, and it was like she had the little cane and stuff. And I thought, we're going to get canings and everything. It's going to be like one of those things. But, and, you know, it's like, what are you doing there? You've got a leonitis. No, you know, stop that. And, you know, we had to dress up in Victorian garb and stuff. And that was cool. That was really fun, you know. We had to eat gruel. Like, that's what had been served at lunchtime or break time or whatever.
Immersive history.
Yeah, it's very Oliver Twist, you know. I just like that kind of thing. I mean, I don't know if, because everybody remembers Victorian Day in Britain, like my age anyway. I mean, maybe it's happening still, but I don't know. Because I remember we used to do Victorian Day. It's like, yeah, we had to, like, live like a Victorian in class and, you know, do Victorian lessons.
And it was just one day, though?
It was like maybe a day or a week or something. It must have been like a week, you know, a week of that.
Really quickly before we run out of time, I'm just curious, did you guys learn local history at all? Local meaning, like...
Where we were living, like, Devon
things
history.
That happen in that area, or when you were in Wales,
maybe
Welsh history, or
funnily enough, yeah, Wales. I mean,
because Texas history is
remember Welsh history being taught.
Oh
no.
Yeah, that's interesting. But I mean, you didn't go to school there the whole time, so maybe it was just a certain year. Because like I just mentioned, Texas history is a class unto itself, from what I can remember. But we only took it like one grade out of my whole school career. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like, I don't know, I want to say 3rd grade or something. I don't know what grade, but it was just the 1 grade, and then that was it, you know?
I do vaguely remember going to primary school in Wales and them talking about the railway riots in Llanelli of 1911, because that made national news.
Oh, yeah.
And there were like a series of strikes on the railway, and a few people were killed, and the police had to be there. I think Winston Churchill, he wasn't the prime minister back then, he was like Secretary of State or something. Yeah. He had to go down there and tell them all off or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the only, like, local history I remember doing in school.
Yeah.
Really, but I don't really remember much else, really, about it. It was all, like, national and, well, you know, everything that Britain was involved in, which was quite a lot, considering it was, like, once part of, you know, it's had an empire spanning 1/4 of the earth.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me curious as to whether in Scotland they learn Scottish-specific history. I would imagine they do.
Yeah, because, I mean, I briefly went to school in Scotland. I can't remember much of it now. Yeah. That was primary school.
I mean, that's the unfortunate thing about our ages, isn't it?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Trying to cast our minds back to...
Yeah.
We should have gotten a couple school kids here to talk about school with us.
Yeah.
You know, current
Get some school
kids
on the podcast.
But anyway. Yeah, well, hope you guys found that interesting. On Thursday, we're going to do things that I wasn't taught in American events that I wasn't taught in history.
American history that you weren't taught about.
So, and there's a lot too.
Yeah.
yeah, so look for that on Thursday. Be sure to follow us on social media. We are at TButty, TEABUTTY on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And thank you so much as always for tuning in. We appreciate your support, and we will talk to you next time.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.